Jurassic Park means a lot to me. I've loved dinosaurs for almost all of my life, and while for me personally Jurassic Park wasn't the catalyst for my liking of dinosaurs, I know for a lot of people it definitely was. Jurassic Park was the first and remains to this day probably the only major dinosaur franchise on the planet. And that's honestly surprising. But Jurassic Park inspired an entire generation of dinosaur fans, and it's honestly not hard to see why. Based on the book by Michael Crichton, Jurassic Park deals with the horrifying concepts of genetic engineering and what happens when man messes with stuff that he really has no control over. While Jurassic Park wasn't the thing that got me into dinosaurs specifically, I still remember when I watched it for the first time. It was on TV one time, and I kind of had to turn it off because it was pretty scary to me at that young age. But obviously, as I grew older, I stopped being afraid and learned to love it dearly, as did so many others. The movie was an incredible success, rising to #1 in the box office at the time, and even today, after accounting for inflation, it still holds a pretty high spot at #9 on the list of the highest grossing movies of all time. Because of its incredible success, it was followed by 2 sequels, The Lost World Jurassic Park and Jurassic Park 3, both of which I obviously watched as a kid. But after Jurassic Park 3 in 2001, there was a weird sort of gap where nothing was released Jurassic Park related for over a decade. And then 14 years later, the franchise returned. I was 13 when Jurassic World first came into cinemas, and I have to say, there has never been a movie that has given me the same wondrous feeling that I felt when Gray Mitchell burst open the hotel doors to reveal the successor to Jurassic Park in all of its glory. While Jurassic World was definitely more of an action film than a thriller, unlike all of its predecessors, there were definitely scenes like the Indominus paddock escape, for example, that really still captured that modern Jurassic Park magic of a person being inches away from death at the hands of a hungry carnivore. It was also the first movie that I went to see in cinemas twice, once with my family and once with my friends, although I really didn't need an excuse to go and see it a second time. And to this day, while it is different from its predecessors, I still love Jurassic World. Fast forward 3 years to 2018 and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom was released. 16-year-old Prince went to go see it, and unfortunately, 16-year-old Prince was disappointed. While it did have some really solid sequences like the amazing reveal of the Baryonyx or Ken Wheatley's death at the hands of the Indoraptor, it wasn't enough to save it from the fact that half of the film took place on the cramped and honestly boring setting of the Lockwood Manor. I honestly wasn't a fan initially of the idea that at the end of the film all of the dinosaurs were free on the mainland, but as time's gone on, I've actually come round to the idea, and after so many years of disagreeing with the statement, I actually agree now with what J.A. Bayona said when he was first directing Fallen Kingdom, in that a bunch of dinosaurs chasing people on an island is gonna get boring real quick. And so I waited. I waited 4 years, and that brings us to today, 2022, when just over a week ago, 20-year-old Prince went to go see the final chapter in a franchise that he's loved since he was a kid. Jurassic World Dominion. And so, what did I think of it? Well, I hate to say it, but I was disappointed. For a movie that was supposed to be the grand finale to a series that inspired an entire generation to love dinosaurs the way I do, it simply didn't deliver. Why didn't it deliver? Well, let's talk about it. Hey everyone, my name is Sam, and welcome to my review of Jurassic World Dominion. I've never really done a movie review before, nor have I gone into detail about how much I love Jurassic Park, but given that you all know how much I love dinosaurs, I can imagine that you could probably guess that it was something I was very into. Now, unfortunately, as I've said, in my own personal opinion, Jurassic World Dominion did not deliver on its promise as an epic conclusion. So let's go in and talk about why, starting off with the plot. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom opened the doors wide in the franchise. We saw a brief idea of what dinosaurs on the mainland would have looked like in 1997 with the release of The Lost World. The Buck T-Rex rampage in San Diego was short-lived, but it gave us a taste of what we might have been able to expect in Jurassic World Dominion. And of course, that was the closest we ever could have had to dinosaurs on the mainland, because they've always been contained up until now. We've never been able to explore in detail what the Jurassic Park franchise would be like if the dinosaurs were on the mainland. There have been a lot of things within the franchise that have tried to explore that, like Michael Crichton's books and the cancelled Jurassic Park Regenesis visual novel, but nothing as official as a movie has ever explored that fully in detail. Until Jurassic World Dominion. We finally had the chance to see what the dinosaurs of Jurassic Park would be like if they were on the mainland. So can someone please tell me why we don't focus on them? For 5 movies now, the dinosaurs have always been the main factor within the plot of the Jurassic Park movies, and rightly fucking so, considering it's called Jurassic Park. Despite the fact that most of the movies are controversial in one way or another, they have never failed to focus on the dinosaurs. Jurassic World Dominion failed. Instead of focusing on the incredible prospect for the franchise of dinosaurs on the mainland, the main antagonistic force of Jurassic World Dominion are overgrown locusts. After all this time, we finally got what we couldn't explore in any other Jurassic film, and they threw it away to focus on a bunch of biosyn insects. I'm completely on board with biosyn being the main enemy of Jurassic World Dominion, because they've technically been the overarching villain for 30 years. The very first villain of Jurassic Park may have been Nedry, but Nedry was working under Dodgson, who was working for Biosyn. And seeing Biosyn again, this ancient villain that we've not seen mentioned since Jurassic Park 1, is really cool. But the fact that the focus of the movie was on the locusts is so disappointing. And let's not forget to talk about the other plot line, Maisie's weird altered backstory. I was honestly quite a big fan of the revelation that Maisie was a human clone. I thought it was quite an interesting twist. I can understand why a lot of people weren't into that idea, as human cloning is maybe dipping a little bit too far into the sci-fi aspect of Jurassic Park. Not to mention that it provided some really good character development for her in Dominion, in that she had this self-doubt and that she, didn't really value herself because she wasn't really human. And then they decided to throw it all away. They changed her entire backstory so that she wasn't a human clone. She was an actual baby made from the DNA of her mother. Why? There was no reason to change her backstory. Yes, it was a little controversial, but they were following through with that at the beginning of Dominion, and then it's like they rewrote the script as they were filming to change her backstory completely. And honestly, Does anyone else not find it a little bit ridiculous that her mother somehow came up with this crazy anti-serum that cured her of all possible diseases, and no one batted an eyelid at that? No one knew that she died of a genetic disorder. No one knew that she didn't have a partner to make Maisie with. No one knew this. Is that not really completely ridiculous? They changed her backstory so she wasn't a clone. She was an actual human made from the DNA of Lockwood's daughter, who actually turned out to be Maisie's mother. And they hid that, and then came up with a different reason, and then hid that as well. What? It's honestly one of the most ridiculous things about the movie, and I really don't like it. It's unnecessary and it's stupid. But yeah, in short, the plot is terrible. The dinosaurs take the backstage, and that is never a good thing for a Jurassic Park film. Moving on, and this is more of a minor point, despite the fact that the doors were finally spread wide open for the dinosaurs to be widespread all over the world, we still got somewhat of a lack of location. We got the snowy tundra where Owen's cabin is, and we really didn't see much of anything happen in that location. We got the city in which the underground dinosaur black market was, and that was a pretty cool location. And then we got the Biosyn Reserve. That was it. And granted, there were different sort of environments within the Biosyn Reserve. Like, there was the bit on the frozen lake on the dam, and most of it was all jungle. But still, somehow, we managed to get a lack of location. But then again, this is a minor point, because I recognize that if they tried to fit, like, a bunch of different locations in, more so than they did, the film would have just felt like they were jumping from one spot to another. But that is why the style of being on the islands works, because you're confined to the islands, but there's so many different locations on the islands. Like in The Lost World, for example, there was the long grass, the worker village, the cliff. All of these different locations set within the same environment. And finally, the finale. And I'm not talking about the final battle in this bit. I'm talking about the very end of the film, how it actually ends. Because it feels blunt and underwhelming. So all the dinosaurs are hanging around in the Biosyn Reserve. Yeah, that sounds familiar, kind of like The Lost World. Except they're not all in the Biosyn Reserve, because at the very end of the film, we see that they're still around in the wild. And not only that, the last shot we get, the final shot, is of a Sinoceratops, I believe, walking with a bunch of elephants. Why? Now, you may be scratching your heads thinking, why am I pointing this out specifically? But just take a minute and remind yourselves about what this film is. It is the conclusion, the last film in a franchise that has inspired a generation of dinosaur fans and has lasted almost 30 years. And the last shot of this film is a dinosaur we don't give a shit about. In Jurassic World, we saw Rexy roaring over Isla Nublar, reclaiming her territory. In Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, we saw Blue looking out over a wide open world. We didn't get anything of the sort for Dominion, and this is where we needed it the most. I don't know what they were thinking. How could they think that that shot was suitable in any way to end this franchise? because it wasn't. So with the general events of the film out of the way, let's talk briefly about the characters. Obviously, Claire and Owen are back as the main characters, and honestly, you know, I like them. They're good as main characters. They're not really annoying or anything. They're good main characters. And yeah, I don't really have a lot to say about them. Obviously, earlier we discussed the fact that Maisie's backstory was changed stupidly. And I do want to mention her character development in the movie as well, because it starts off with her being rebellious, and obviously she's 14 in the movie, so she's going to start doing that anyway. But she's rebellious because Owen and Claire have to be protective of her, and she doesn't see them as her parents. And then she learns from Wu that Charlotte Lockwood is her actual mother, and learns from Ellie Sattler that her mother loved her, further solidifying the bond between her and her dead actual mother. And then when Owen and Claire return, she immediately does a U-turn and goes, "There's my parents!" It's honestly stupid. They could not have done her character development worse in this film. Because if they'd have modified the plot so that the whole genetic disorder ultimate cure thing was still a thing, but Charlotte Lockwood wasn't her mother, but they stuck with the original plotline, because the original plotline was that Maisie was made from Charlotte's DNA. So, if we would have gone off of that, then the cure would have probably still been within Maisie's DNA. So, we wouldn't have need to do the weird U-turn that Maisie's mother was actually Charlotte Lockwood. And that would have allowed us to have a plotline where the whole thing about Maisie being alienated because she's not human could have followed through, and Henry Wu would have seen her not as a person, but just an object to get the cure from, and Owen and Claire are the only real parents she will ever have. But instead we got this mess. So, yeah. Speaking of Henry Wu, what did you do to him? Henry Wu's character was completely ruined in Jurassic World Dominion, and that is a fact. Since Jurassic Park, Henry Wu has been an arrogant, self-obsessed scientist, blinded by his own scientific hubris, and that is his character. And it has remained his character throughout the whole of the franchise. Granted, we only saw him in Jurassic Park 1 and not in any of its 2 sequels, but when he returned in Jurassic World, he was still the same person. And after all of this time, you're suddenly giving him morality? You're talking about the same man whose response to the Indominus Rex killing people was, "That's unfortunate." The same person who developed the Indoraptor, a creature specifically designed for killing, and you're suddenly telling me he's gained morality now? No! In Michael Crichton's original book, Henry Wu dies in spectacular fashion, because just after he's had a moment of glorious vanity, thinking about how he put all the pieces of the dinosaurs back together beautifully, he gets attacked and eaten alive by a raptor. And honestly, me and every other Jurassic Park fan were debating how Henry Wu was going to perish in Jurassic World Dominion, because we thought that was the only logical explanation for how his character arc was going to end. Not this weird U-turn for his entire character, where he suddenly turned into this man who cares. He's never cared. The only thing I like about Henry Wu is that he got to meet Grant again and that he remembered him. And speaking of Grant, let's talk about our 3 original heroes returning to the screen. You can imagine my excitement when Alan Grant, Ellie Sattler, and Ian Malcolm were finally back in another Jurassic adventure. Obviously, we saw Ian Malcolm in Fallen Kingdom, but it was a really minor part. This time, we saw all 3 of our original Jurassic Park heroes face off against the dinosaurs once again. And honestly, all of their little interactions, as well as the interactions that they had with Owen and the others, I really liked that Alan and Owen interacted, because they're obviously the two living characters that know the most about raptors. But I loved seeing them return, and I loved seeing them interact and run and fight the dinosaurs. It was amazing. Kayla Watts, the new character, the pilot, she was a nice addition to the crew. I did like her character. There wasn't really a lot of character development to her, but I think there was enough in that she was a good character to be present with the others as a new character for this film. Rain Delacourt, the dinosaur poacher, he was just sort of there in the background. I kind of wanted a bit more from him. Not to mention, I think his death was really unsatisfying, because he just got killed by the miniature dinos, and I think it would have been a lot better if he would have been killed by the adult Carnotaurus and Allosaurus that were in that same compound. And because we'd seen him capture Beta, Blue's baby, and obviously he'd probably been capturing and stealing baby dinosaurs for as long as the dinosaurs have been on the mainland. So it would have been really poetic that something that he couldn't stand up against by himself was the thing to kill him, an adult dinosaur. It was kind of cool to see Zia and Franklin again, and it's not really surprising that they were sort of hanging around, but I was excited to see Barry again, considering we haven't seen him since Jurassic World. Soriona Santos, the woman in white who hands off the Atrociraptors, she's weird. Like, I feel like she should have been a bit more of a major character that got eaten at some point during the latter half of the film. But she was just sort of there. Ramsey Cole as well. He was a bit of a weird character. I did like him. He was another cool new addition, and I did like his character. But I feel like the main sort of part of his character was supposed to be his sort of fake betrayal partnership with Dodgson, and he had that moment with Dodgson where he was just like, I'm not like you, and I feel like that was supposed to mean something, but it just didn't, because we'd hardly ever seen them together, and we didn't really get the sense that Dodgson valued their friendship that much. So yeah, that was kind of bad. But speaking of Dodgson, you have no idea how excited I was when Dodgson himself made a return.
Dodgson! We've got Dodgson here!
There is no greater villain that I would have rather seen return for this final movie, because, as I mentioned earlier, Dodgson was the very first villain. If you think about it, Dodgson is responsible for everything, because he was the one that hired Nedry to sabotage Jurassic Park, and the sabotage of Jurassic Park led to every other film. So Dodgson really is the original villain and the cause of everything. And his death scene, well, we'll get into that in a second. But with the characters done, let's move into the best part of the film, the dinosaurs. Now, obviously, there were a lot of new dinosaurs, so I'm not really going to talk about the old ones very much that we've seen before. I'm mainly going to talk about the new ones. Although, I would like to quickly mention Blue and Beta, because I thought they were going to have a much bigger part in the film. Blue we only saw at the very beginning and very end, and I really thought that she would have a bigger part in this film. But regardless, let's talk about the dinosaurs that were a part of the film. And I gotta say, while a lot of them were amazing, there were some that weren't so much. For example, Moros Intrepidus, the weird tiny baby tyrannosaur that we saw at Biosyn. Now, I'm all for introducing background dinosaurs, and this movie had a few of them. For example, Lystrosaurus, which isn't actually a dinosaur, but, you know. Dreadnoughtus was a pretty cool background dinosaur. There was supposed to be a scene with an Oviraptor that was cut from the film where the Oviraptor fought the Lystro. Yeah. But of all the dinosaurs to include, Moros intrepidus isn't even a lesser known dinosaur. I guarantee you, like, 1 in 10,000 people who went to see the film knew what Moros intrepidus was, because I had never heard of this. And, you know, the thing doesn't even have Saurus in its name. No, and again, I'm not against introducing much newer dinosaurs into Jurassic Park films. I think it's a good thing. But I feel like this dinosaur was just so, like, no one knows about this thing. Like, why don't you put something like Eutyrannus in there? Like, put a baby Eutyrannus. Or a full-grown Eutyrannus. That would have been amazing. But just, I feel like because it's so obscure, just no one... because it's so obscure, no one would know or care about it. Segisaurus would have been a great one to include, as that was on the original Jurassic Park list. But regardless, obviously, like I mentioned, there were other background dinosaurs. The Lystro, the Dreadnoughtus, and the Oviraptor was going to be in it as well. But they were all just sort of in the background. Now let's talk about the dinosaurs that had a main part. And let's start with the Pyroraptor. Now, the Pyroraptor wasn't actually named on screen, but it was the feathered raptor that Owen and Kayla fought on the ice. And I think this is definitely one of the worst sequences, because it's just one raptor, and it felt like just a bit of a filler encounter. Like, they didn't have a single moment of rest, and they couldn't allow them a single moment of rest. They had to shove a dinosaur in there. But I must say, a swimming feathered raptor was kind of interesting to see. Although, swimming and feathers... I'm not an animal expert, but I'm pretty sure those two don't really go together. Like, I'm pretty sure... the dinosaur had quite thick feathers, and I'm pretty sure they'd just be so soaked that the dinosaur would be quite, it'd find it quite difficult to move after it got out of the water. But that's just me. They could be you know, it could be that the feathers were, you know, longer and, you know, less fluffy, so it didn't really bog it down too much. But, you know, it just seemed like a bit of a filler encounter. We obviously had the introduction of the Quetzalcoatlus, and that was a perfect big pterosaur to sort of one-up the pteranodons that we've seen so many times. I definitely enjoyed the kind of brief but definitely cool interaction it had when it attacked the plane. One animal that definitely surprised me was the Dimetrodons in the cave. That was definitely a surprise. I gotta be honest, when I first saw the sail in the water, I immediately thought Spinosaurus, and I'm certain that I wasn't the only one. But nonetheless, I was actually kind of happy with the Dimetrodon. In the cave, it was a cool setting, and they were really kind of scary, despite the fact that, like, you know, they're quite big and cumbersome compared to most of the fast and deadly dinosaurs that are in the Jurassic Park franchise overall. The cave environment was definitely the best way to harness their scary factor, I guess you could say. Now, the Atrociraptors were definitely a great feature of this film, because since Jurassic World, I've missed wild raptors. Because obviously in all of the films before Jurassic World, the raptors were just enemies and they were deadly. In Jurassic World, they got names and they became good guys, which means we got attached to them and stuff like that. I really missed having wild, deadly, non-biased, villainous raptors, and we got those back in Dominion with the Atrociraptors. They were deadly, they were relentless, and yeah, they were awesome. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to mention dinosaurs that we'd seen before, but I cannot do this review without talking about the legendary return of the Dilophosaurus. Dennis Nedry's death goes down in history as one of the scariest Jurassic Park sequences of all time. It's not the scariest for me personally. For me personally, nothing beats Peter Ludlow's death in The Lost World. I still am very terrified of that sequence. But I can imagine a lot of people had nightmares about Dilophosaurus, and I think young me was definitely one of them. And after almost 30 years, 6 films, we finally got their return. You can go back and watch my reaction to the original trailer for Jurassic World Dominion, and you can see the excitement on my face when the Dilos made their return. Now, when they attacked Claire and were scared off by Owen, I was initially fearful because the rest of the film had been a bit of a disappointment even up to that point, and I was thinking to myself, is that it? Did we really wait 30 years for that? And then Dodgson came along. Now, I obviously knew that Dodgson was going to die. I could figure it out just from the fact that he was there, because not only is he the main villain of the film, and villains always die in the Jurassic Park franchise, he is responsible, if you think about it, for basically every death in the entire franchise. Because if it wasn't for him sending Nedry to sabotage the park probably wouldn't have failed, and, you know, Lost World wouldn't have happened, Alan Grant probably wouldn't have gone to his Lashawna, and Jurassic World wouldn't have been a thing. He's responsible for it all. The deaths of everyone in the Jurassic Park franchise, the blood is on his hands. So I knew that the souls would manifest in a dinosaur killing him. The only question was what dinosaur was going to kill him. Now, for the whole film, I was sort of debating how he was going to die. And really, it could have been anything. But I gotta tell you, when I saw the shadow of the Dilophosaurus crest appear through the smoke, I was so excited. Because just like that, I knew that the main villain, the overarching villain of a 30-year franchise that I had loved, was going to meet the best and most horrifying end imaginable. Because if you think about it, out of all the dinosaurs in the Jurassic Park franchise, getting killed by a Dilo is probably the most horrific, if you don't count the non-canon stuff like the Troodons. Because, you know, the raptors, yeah, they eat you while you're alive, and the T-Rex just sort of chomps you up in one bite. The Dilos paralyze you. That was a thing that was never really utilized in the original when Nedry was attacked by the Dilo, because he just got blinded. The announcer in Jurassic Park made sure to tell us that the venom doesn't just blind you, it paralyzes you. And that's what happened to Dodgson, and you can see that. And not only did he get attacked by one Dilo, he got attacked by 3. And you can see, as the lights flash, him starting to get paralyzed just because of the amount of venom that was on his face and just on him. And not only was I so happy that the Dilos got another beautiful kill. I said when I first watched the trailer that I wanted them to kill someone, and oh boy did they deliver. Not only that, it's of course a beautiful circularity, because he of course met the same fate that the man he sent to sabotage Jurassic Park did so many years before. And not only did he meet the same demise, he had it so much worse just because there were 3 of them instead of 1. Granted, Nedry was, you know, blind without his glasses anyway, but Dodgson was cornered. 3 Dilos standing around him. He knew in that moment that he was going to die, and even so he tried to play it off as a joke with the small, tiny chance that he might survive, and you can just see the horror in his face when he realizes what's about to happen after the venom hits him right in the face. To sum it up, the Dilo's return was spectacular. It was worth the 30-year wait, and I didn't expect to be able to say that, but I'm so glad that I can. And so we move on to the last two dinosaurs of the film, the main stars, beginning with a dinosaur that we've all wanted to see for years. If you go to any video where people talk about like the top 5 dinosaurs that they want to see in a Jurassic Park film, Therizinosaurus has always been on the list because it's amazing. Therizinosaurus is the perfect example of a herbivore to feature in Jurassic Park because it's the perfect example of the fact that herbivores are not always friendly and can be as dangerous as carnivores. And I gotta say, the introduction of the Therizino was perfect. It was amazing. The tenseness that it created, the way it just swatted the deer and killed it immediately, the way it looked terrifying because I think it was meant to be blind, was just incredible. And I was happy just with that encounter. If that was all we saw from the Therizino, I would have been happy. But then they went and brought it back in the final battle. And that is just fantastic. And I think I have to talk about the final dinosaur while talking about the final battle, which is of course the biggest of them all, Giganotosaurus. Now, I would like to quickly make the point that I'm pretty sure they referred to it as the biggest carnivorous dinosaur, when that rank is already held by the Spino, but regardless, the Giga is also, like the Therizino, something that Jurassic Park fans have wanted to see for years, and let me tell you, they did fucking amazing with it. Obviously, Ramsey introduced it as the apex predator, which was a brilliant introduction. We had it come along and bully the T-Rex as its first proper sort of moving introduction. Then we had the entire sequence where it attacked the group, not to mention a little callback to Malcolm and the T-Rex from the first film. And then we got the final battle. I thought that the Giga versus the Rex was great, and then they brought in the Therizino for a 3-way fight. It was fantastic. And it was beautifully handled, because the Jurassic Park Giga definitely could have beaten the T-Rex. In real life, it probably would have been a different story, because a T-Rex is more powerful than a Giga in real life. But the Jurassic Park Giga is more powerful than the Rex, and it would have won in a fight. But the fact that the Rex won is very cool and very symbolic, because you can't kill off the T-Rex. You just can't. And the Giga dying is, a combination of the Therizino and the Rex, was a brilliant and beautiful symbolic thing, in that even in the face of overwhelming odds, Rexy the T-Rex, the same T-Rex from Jurassic Park in 1993, will always triumph. And so, that's it. That's Jurassic Park. While I am so disappointed at the way the plot turned out and how the dinosaurs basically served as something to move the humans about and not as a primary plot device, I gotta say, the action sequences and the dinosaurs, they really made me feel like a little kid again. And regardless of what happens next, where Jurassic Park goes next, if nothing else, while it was my final thoughts being that it was an underwhelming finale, if nothing else, it gave us some pretty fucking cool dinosaurs. Thank you so much for watching this video, everyone. I really hope you did enjoy my review of Jurassic World Dominion. If you did, I would really appreciate it if you went and left a like and subscribe if you feel so inclined, and leave a comment about your own opinions on the film and maybe what your favorite dinosaur or sequence was. Jurassic Park will always remain in my heart as one of my favorite franchises of all time, and I actually have something Jurassic Park related, a little project that I'm going to be doing on the channel very soon. So make sure to go and join my Discord down below, because I posted a teaser to it yesterday. So thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and I will see you on another video very, very soon. Goodbye, everyone.